Hi there, my friends, and welcome to Meditating and Painting Your Way to Calm. This feature is called Finding Home Inside of You, and I want to thank you for coming along this journey with me. I really love the idea of taking creativity and meditation practices and even a component of journaling and bringing them all together with the intention of finding a way to become more yourself. And I think that so much of our time is spent with trying to figure out who we're not, either based on our parents or siblings or how society puts a label on us, that many times we forget to lay down that conversation about who you're not and to start to have the conversation about, well, who are you? And so I like to take painting and creativity, and I like to begin to have that conversation in a way that lets down your borders, lets down those feelings of being even defensive with yourself, to meet yourself maybe for the first time, and find a way to not only connect with yourself, but embrace who you are. And so thank you for coming along this journey with me. What I like to do is I like to pick a painting based on someone's work that is a lovely artist that you can appreciate and maybe even have heard of in the past. And then I'd like to take it and I'd like to create our own version of it, because I'll just be honest with you. When I'm creating, I really like to create something that I enjoy and would be proud to either put it in a frame and put it on my wall or give it as a gift. And of course, it would be infused with all of the discoveries you made in the process. So it becomes a very special, intimate conversation on a piece of paper. So I hope you will join me, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you and helping to facilitate this deepened awareness of who you are and your unique and beautiful qualities. See you in the classroom. All right, so in the resources, you will see a copy of a painting by Claude Monet entitled Haystacks at Sunset. And so here is a copy of it here on my wall, and I would like to encourage you to have some sort of access to it, either printing it off or maybe having it on another monitor so that you can see it. So as we're walking through the process of how we're creating our own painting, you also have this painting to reference. I will be using acrylic paint as I create. You can actually use whatever you'd like, and you can use whatever color scheme that you like, but I wanted to go over what it is that we're using today. I'm using an apple barrel pewter gray, apple barrel white, and these can be found at your local craft stores and even at some of the Walmarts. I've seen they have a pretty good craft area. Apple barrel khaki, apple barrel bright red, and apple barrel jet black. Okay, so I'm going to be using grays, reds, whites, doing some blending with making some pink, even like lightening up the khaki color, because those are the colors that I'm really being drawn to right now. But again, you can use any sort of color palette that you'd like. But if you're trying to go for the look that we see in the original painting, those would be the colors that I'm going to be using to create the effect that I'm creating. So this is an 11 by 14 piece of paper here. It's a mixed media paper, so you could actually even use watercolor paint or just even mixtures of like your oil pastels, things like that. So just depending on what you have on hand, just go ahead and use that. And I would say also have a pencil, perhaps a Sharpie or a black pen. And I will have oil pastels to maybe add in some details. You could just use crayons if you don't have any oil pastels on hand. Again, I really do strive to bring these opportunities to create in a way that you can use literally whatever you have in your house. If you have the basics, crayons, markers, colored pencils, you can find as much satisfaction in doing this as if you were using paint. All right, so go ahead and gather up your materials, and I'll see you back here in a few minutes. All right, So before we get started with each segment of creating this painting, I'm going to invite you through a form of meditation or journal writing to really set the space for making this kind of a holy place, a place where you really can get quiet, allow your breath to be part of the process as far as, steadying your breathing and really committing to this time to create. This painting probably will take no more than an hour, but it is something that you can come back to, and so it's not something that has to be rushed through. And so whenever the time permits for you to be available to do this, come on back and continue to create. I always have this wall set up for me to keep my painting here. If you have an easel to put your painting on, or maybe just a small end table to just set it aside, that's totally fine. I like having it on a wall because sometimes we overthink how something is looking. And so to have it on a wall is to see it as it normally is seen. So it's not seen looking down at a table, and it's not seen just kind of put over to the side. It is seen at eye height and usually about 6 feet away, right? So you really want to see your painting in its true context, and that tends to help you release that idea of it has to be perfect, right? All right, so let me go ahead, and I'm reading from a book called The Gift of Being Yourself by David Benner, and this chapter is titled Knowing Yourself as You Really Are. And so I invite you to listen in, maybe find a quiet place, or this might even be something as if you're prepping your all your supplies, you can go ahead and prep your supplies while I am reading this segment. And here's what it says. Knowing the depths of God's personal love for each of us as individuals is the foundation of all genuine self-knowledge. But there is yet more to be learned from reflecting on how God knows us. The self that God persistently loves is not my prettied up, pretend self, but my actual self, the real me. But, master of delusion that I am, I have trouble penetrating my web of self-deceptions and knowing this real me. I continually confuse it with some ideal self that I wish I were. The roots of our pretend self lie in our childhood discovery that we can secure love by presenting ourselves in the most flattering light. A little girl hides her hatred of her brother because she knows that she should love him. This lack of integrity is then reinforced by her parents, who commend her loving behavior. A young boy denies his resentment after he fails to get something he desires. In so doing, he takes a step towards a loss of awareness of what he is really feeling. In short, we learn to fake it, appearing as we think important others want us to be, and ignoring the evidence to the contrary. This may all seem quite innocent. However, it sheds its innocence when we lose touch of our actual experience, because it always involves a diminishment of our grounding in reality. Let me say that again. This all seems quite innocent. However, it sheds its innocence when we lose touch with our actual experience, because this always involves a diminishment of our grounding in reality. Thomas Merton warns, there is no greater disaster in the spiritual life than to be immersed in unreality. For life is maintained and nourished in us by our vital relation with reality. The truly spiritual life is not an escape from reality, but a total commitment to it. So I'd like you to take a few moments before we begin our painting process and think about those moments in your life when you started to disengage with what your true feelings were about things. And maybe take one particular time that's rising up right now for you to really contend with. And let's allow this time as we paint to begin to connect and re-engage with your truest feelings about a situation that's going on right now. So I'll give you a few moments to go ahead and think on that. And when you're ready, we will go ahead and start creating our painting for the day. All right, so let's go ahead and start this painting. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to be drawing it out with an oil pastel so you can see my lines and details as I create, because I want to make sure that you can see what it is that I'm creating. But again, I want to remind you that this is more about a process, like what we call process art, which is you're creating in a way that's inspired by this painting by by Claude Monet, but you don't have to get it exactly the way you see it. It's just having something there so that you can focus less on the perfection part and more on just really moving and flowing with the lines on the paper and with your process as you're going into kind of a meditative state, for lack of a better way to say it, when you're creating a painting. So in my resources, I have put some kind of templates for how to create this type of haystack house, or even just your traditional house if you want to go at it where you're just creating the house as a representation of who you are and coming to yourself, which is what my intention was behind picking this particular painting, because of the soft tones and the mood that's there. So you need to decide, first of all, where you want to put this particular structure, whether it be towards the forefront of your painting or over in the corner or on either left or right, or even up if you're going to put it on a hill, that sort of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and begin by just adding mine over here in the corner. And again, you can go for what you see there, or you can create a traditional style of house. But at this point, I'm not really going for any sort of structure. I'm just kind of letting my hand just kind of organically move. So I'm letting it form, and then I'm changing the form, and then I'm letting it form again, and then changing the form. So again, I like the looseness of this because it allows me to not get too perfect with how the style is, because that's really not the point. The point is the representation behind this structure. So you may add in windows if you like, add in a roofing structure if you like. And then you can also go smaller or larger, or even add more structures in as you see fit. Okay. So now once I have that in place, and you can always pause this if I'm going a little too fast and then come back on when you're ready. Then I want to add in this mood, which is represented by all these horizon lines. So again, just letting the flow of my hand kind of dictate where the lines are going to go. And then you can feel free, once you start painting, to change where this goes. And it could be that by the end of this, maybe you don't necessarily see the structure anymore. Maybe you'll hide the structure behind the landscape, based on what kind of representation you have of home and you coming back to yourself as we go through this process. So again, noticing how it feels to have your pencil or a crayon in your hand. Maybe it's been a while since you've done something like this. So let it play on your paper, knowing that everything can be changed. Okay, so now as I have this structure here, it kind of helps me to now not feel so pressured to bring certain things to the forefront because I've gotten a sense of where I'm going with the painting. And then from here, I will start to create using my paint, using your colored pencils, your markers, your crayons, whatever it is you would like to add to this. I would encourage you, though, to try to keep your color palette set with about 2 to 4 colors. Because again, the mood we're trying to capture here is more about just that connection and in this particular venue with how we want to be connected is there's that softness to this. Now, that's a suggestion because if for you what life is feeling like is you have more brightness or the opposite, more darkness, then let that really be expressed when you go into this painting phase of your painting. All right, so I'll give you a few minutes to go ahead and put together what it is you want to do. As I showed you in that initial video, I'm showing you the colors that I'll be working with, and we'll walk through that process in the next video. All right, see you back soon. All right, so before we begin our painting, I want to add a little more to the conversation of coming back to that place of home. So I want to continue to read from this book called The Gift of Being Yourself, and I'll put all the details down in the resources. This is not required for you to buy it, but it's something that if you really find value in it, you can purchase it and read along on your own as well. So continuing on with knowing yourself as you really are. Most of us are quite willing to embrace reality when it fits with how we see ourselves in the world, and when it is not overly unpleasant. However, when our life experiences confront us with things about ourselves that we're unwilling to accept, we call on psychological defense mechanisms to help maintain a sense of safety and stability. While these unconscious strategies help with short-term coping, they block long-term growth. And this is because we distort reality. Ultimately, their function is to protect us from an unpleasant truth. The human capacity for self-deception is astounding. This is taught in the Bible and confirmed by psychology. Some people are highly skilled at deceiving themselves. However, their duplicity pales in comparison with the endlessly creative ways in which each and every one of us deceives ourselves. Let me say that again. The human capacity for self-deception is astounding. Some people are highly skilled in deceiving others and themselves. Their duplicity pales in comparison with the endlessly creative ways in which each and every one of us deceives ourselves. So there's that skill in deceiving others, and then there's also that skill in deceiving ourselves. I know for me, it has always been very important for me to have someone or one or two people, doesn't have to be everybody, who can be honest with me, and that I trust them enough to, even if they haven't gotten the picture completely right of what might be going on with me, they have it enough right for me to step back and take notice. And that's something even when I feel like I'm being self-aware, as I pride myself on being, but also understanding that we have ways of deceiving ourselves, right? Ways where we have, it has kept us safe, especially like as a child, if you've gone through any sort of trauma or maybe even throughout your adult life, those things saved your life. But then what it also can do, when it's no longer a need to be in your life, it actually blocks you from your truest, meaningful life, right? And so I'd like you to take a few moments before we start our painting process, and maybe even take it into your painting process, and think about something in particular that might be coming up right now where you know, all right, I don't have this right. I need to rethink this. Either this particular way I'm approaching a situation or approaching a person, and decide as we go into the painting process, let your mind just start to let go of how you've been handling it and invite in the quiet, another way of approaching that problem. And I'll see you back here in a moment. All right, well, welcome back. So if you've done a video or a class with me before, you know how I really love the Tibetan singing bowls. And so as we go into this next portion of the painting process, I would like to invite us in with the Tibetan singing bowls. So what I'd like to do is briefly go over what I'm going to be doing. And in my background, I'm going to start to use pinks and whites and reds to kind of blend into the background and begin this conversation with the page. Now you may choose to use different colors or use the same color, but I invite you to, as we continue to move in, and it's a moment, what will happen is the bells will start, and then once they stop, we're going to take that space that is created with the sound and with the movement of paint on the page, and really engage in these questions that we have about how to engage ourselves more fully in the conversation of who am I and how can I let more of myself come to the forefront. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, here we go. So as you can see, I'm using a dry brush technique, and I'm kind of adding the red and the yellow, or sorry, the red and the white a little bit organically, sporadically, and allowing the colors to marry in at some spots where you see more of the pink, and in other spots where I want that white to come through. So as you're going through your painting process, I want to encourage you to just let yourself just add the paint to the paper, not necessarily with an intention of getting it perfectly filled with the paint, and also not necessarily moving in the same direction every time. So you can go from just wiping it on with a dry brush to loading the paint on your paintbrush and doing what we call a dappling effect, where you're just dabbing over the top. I have a little palette of paint, so what I'm doing is, as I look down, I'm not overthinking what color I'm picking, and I'm just adding it to my paper. Now, I'll warn you, if you are traditionally a perfectionist, this might feel very difficult to do. And it might be a place where you're already feeling this critiquing going on. Well, I want you to just notice that. Notice that about yourself. Start to think about where that has come from. And not be too hard on yourself, but just notice it. Again, I'm taking another approach with my paintbrush, and I'm just moving it back and forth in a rapid fire kind of movement. I actually use all different sizes of paintbrushes, so once you decide that you want to maybe move on to a different paintbrush, feel free to get it. Sometimes I will take my painting and I will turn it upside down and see it from another perspective. So you may even start to notice as you're putting the paint on that you're noticing spots where you're like, I love how that looks. I'm going to leave that alone. And maybe you'll start to add it into another part of your painting. And as we've gone through the last 2 meditations, if there's something in particular you really want to be thinking about as you're painting, just set it in your mind. Set that intention of, as I paint through this, what I really want clarity on is, and then just silently say it as a prayer to yourself. Now in this segment, we're going to fill the background, and then we're going to let it dry. So that's going to be an invitation for you to walk away and go and do something else. Again, not overthinking it, just allowing the paint and the brush to play with the paper without any judgment. And I want you to think about this. What would it be like if you lived a life where you weren't experiencing judgment? And I know we can easily say that there's a judgment of a parent or even a spouse or a friend or a sibling. But I think the most insidious of all can be how harshly we judge ourselves. I very often have judged myself as a creative because I have a lot of people around me who are, quote, more talented than I deem I should have no right, should even be thinking about painting. And I had to release that judgment because painting is for anybody who feels like painting. And there is a quote, I believe, by Pablo Picasso. I'll look it up and put it in the resources, where it says, if your mind tells you to paint, paint. And it's like, yeah, if you go and you buy the supplies and you bring them into your house and you have paper and you have paintbrushes, why are you not painting? Many times it's this judgment. So if we easily fall into this when it comes to creativity, where else are we being this critical? Okay. So as I look at this painting, I'm just taking it in fully. Thinking about the movement, thinking about imperfections, thinking about imperfections in myself. And I'm going to let it sit. I'm going to let it sit. Is that a metaphor on life? Sit with your imperfections. All right, I will see you back in a little while. Again, let your painting dry for a little bit, and then we'll come back. We will begin with a meditation, and then we'll start to add some details. All right, so let's continue on with this conversation about knowing yourself as you really are. Continuing with the book titled The Gift of Being Yourself by David Brenner. Self-deception occurs automatically. This is part of what psychologists mean when they say that the defense mechanisms operate in the unconscious. It is also part of what theologians mean when they speak about things missing the mark, sometimes called sin. We don't really have to choose self-deception. It is, to use contemporary computer jargon, the default option. We are usually quite adept in identifying self-deception in others. In someone else, we easily see a rigid embrace of niceness at the expense of any acknowledgement of anger or resentment. This is the defense mechanism of reaction formation. Some unacceptable feeling or impulse is eliminated from awareness by our expression of its opposite. In another person, we identify a rationalization when they give a good reason for their behavior, but not the real reason. In yet someone else, a simple denial of feelings that are obviously present illustrates the most basic form of self-deception that exists. Recognizing these same things in ourselves is much more difficult. The penetration of our delusions is enormously challenging. It requires a relentless commitment to truth and a deep sense of freedom from fear of rejection. Nothing facilitates this like the knowledge of being deeply loved. Nothing facilitates this commitment to truth and a deep sense of freedom from fear of rejection, like the knowledge of being truly loved. Some final words. Spiritual transformation involves the purification of sight. In the Bible, in the New Testament, Luke 11:34, Jesus said, "If our eye is healthy, our whole body will be full of light." We have to learn to see and accept what is really there. Stripping away our illusions is part of this process, as it reorients us towards reality. To see God as God is, and not as who we want God to be, requires that we see ourselves as we actually are. For the same cloud of illusions obscures our view of both God and ourselves. To see God as God is and not as we want Him to be requires that we see ourselves as we actually are. So as we go into this next phase of this painting, I want to invite you to really tap into how you can start to see yourself more accurately and not how others have defined you. And this might be a moment to invite you into this opportunity to, when you're finished with painting parts of your painting, to just jot down some thoughts that come to mind as you have realizations and revelations and discovery and clarity and wisdom. See you at the next video. All right, so again, we're going to start this by focusing in with the Tibetan singing bells. And then I would like you to begin to add in your details in your structure that you have on your painting. So let's go ahead and begin. And wherever you would like to start, go ahead and continue on in that process. I'm going to keep moments of silence, and then I'll add in as we begin to paint. Sorry about that. There we go. So again, take this intuitive approach to your painting, or even if you created a structure, as you begin to add your paint, if you're finding that the movement of your paintbrush is changing the structure of your home, your house, your hut, allow that to happen. Allow that reflection to occur. This is your painting, and what's underneath is only known by you. And then maybe even redraw the lines of your background. Allow the paintbrush to begin to bring in the whispers of this conversation you're having. And feel free to use that reference of the painting that you printed off that I added in the resources. But again, that's just a starting point, but it does not need to end up there. So I'm just inviting different patterns with my brush, allowing some color mixing to occur. If you're using acrylic paint, adding a little water to the mix to start to blend in the colors a little more. Just continue to allow that conversation with yourself to add to your painting. If you're feeling a bit hesitant or even fearful, stop the video and write a little bit about what you're experiencing. How are you feeling about becoming more engaged with the real you? Is there a reason why it might be better for you not to be more of yourself? Will something need to change? And are you ready for it to change? So what I like to do when I'm painting is I like to make sure that whatever I've put into one area of the painting, I like to add it into the others, just because for me it feels like it makes it more cohesive, and that I've addressed a way so that it's just not a space just thrown onto the painting, but that it's a conversation that's happening all throughout the painting. All right, I'd like you to step back from your painting a little bit, and if you have it on a table, just go ahead and pick it up and put it in front of you. And just invite whatever conversation comes from the painting. Not necessarily critique, but just based on what we've been talking about throughout the process of this course. And then I'd like you to just set it aside, perhaps do a little bit of journal writing. Give it about 30 minutes to just sit and dry, and then we'll come back with a final meditation and put some more finishing points on this painting. See you back in a bit. All right, hello and welcome back. I would like to finish off this part of the course with this meditation, where I'd like to talk about how you can go into praying more deeply for more connectedness with this home inside of you, this self, this truest self, who you really are. How do you get to that place where you not only know who that is, but also someone you've made peace with? And so I'd like to read a few more words from The Gift of Being Yourself by David Benner, and then we will finish up our final details on our painting. All right, so let's begin. Let's talk about how to have prayerful reflection on this. Genuinely knowing yourself as you are known by God can be quite frightening. But if God knows you and still loves you deeply, then there is hope that you can do the same. Genuine self-knowledge is available to all who, and there's 3 components. Number 1, genuinely desire it. Number 2, are willing to prayerfully reflect on their experience. And number 3, have the courage to meet themselves and God in solitude. Let's go over that again. This genuine self-knowledge is available to all who, number 1, genuinely desire it. Number 2, are willing to prayerfully reflect on their experience. And number 3, have the courage to meet themselves and God in solitude. If your self-knowledge is limited, prayerfully reflect on which of these 3 prerequisites is most deficit. If you hunger to know yourself more deeply, continue the daily prayer that we've been talking about. And then watch for times when you can be alone with yourself and God. Often these times are already in the rhythm of your week, but are filled with distractions to protect you. Hear that? To protect you from solitude. Can you imagine? So many people running around, I just need some time alone. I need some time alone. Being alone and being in solitude are 2 different things. And that might be something to explore as well. Some people have music on whenever they are alone. Others turn to their computer, television, or their phone in ways that serve the same soul-numbing purposes. The possibilities for avoiding solitude are endless. After prayerful reflection to identify the things you use to avoid solitude, covenant with God and yourself to set aside some time to simply be still with God in the depths of yourself. Don't give any agenda for this time other than sitting with God in silence. Begin with a simple prayer asking God to help you be still. Don't feel that you need to fill your time with words or thoughts, just remain still and believe that you are in God's presence, whether you sense it or not. And at the end of the time, not during it, write your experiences in your journal. Note your thoughts, reactions, and feelings, and then give them to God. The point is not analysis, but identification and release. Note them for what they are, and then give them to God. Self-knowledge is God's gift, not the result of your introspection. Say that again. Self-knowledge is God's gift, not the result of your introspection. Remember, this is not self-therapy. It is spending time with God and allowing God to meet you and help you know yourself as you are known. Isn't that beautiful? It's a gift. And it's a gift that God wants to give us. Now, I know this idea of sitting in solitude can be a bit of a daunting one. And it is why I've created lessons such as the one you're in right now, this session. Because I think sometimes, just because of the nature of maybe who we are personality-wise, having something to do with our hands helps us to get out of our head, and then real clarity starts to come. So again, in this next session, what I'd like you to do, we're going to start to put our finishing touches on our painting. And I would like you to see if you can start to practice that solitude in the midst of our classroom session. Okay? So I'm going to start with the bells, or the singing bowls, and then I'm going to give us a little bit of quiet. And I'll tell you right now what we're going to do as we go into this painting is if you want to fill in your spaces. So there's a lot of just different textures that we put on this background. If you want to add more in or maybe deepen the color in your structure that you created, this would be the time to do it as we finish up. Or just really let that organic piece of our conversation with our paintbrush to continue to guide what you're creating on your page. Okay? All right, so let's go into the next session whenever you're ready. again, continue to allow the paint and the brush to guide you. So even if you come away from your painting and it looks completely different from where you started, invite that conversation into this time of finding home in yourself. Trust your brush, trust your thoughts. Maybe even try closing your eyes. Just as the conversation continues on with the brush and the paint and the paper, invite that conversation into your own heart. Okay. Feel free to pick up your painting or step away from your painting. Let it sit for a bit, let your paint dry, and then come back to it and see if it invites more conversation. See if you want to engage it more. See what you're longing for as you go into the painting. And again, invite that conversation. I'll see you back here with some final thoughts. All right. So as we look at our painting once more, is there one word that sticks out to you as you look at your painting? Is it warmth? Is it peace? Is it kindness? Is it home? Whatever word you can think of, you can take either a wet brush and just write it into the painting. And then if you want as well, you could write something using either a thin fine point Sharpie or a black pen or even like an oil pastel. And just begin to write it in. And let that be your personal conversation. And then if you're finding that maybe you don't want all of it to be seen, maybe just add a little bit on top. That can be not so easily read. Or if you love having that kind of as a reminder in your painting, allow it to just stay in there. And this is the moment where you can add those final details. You should be very proud of yourself for taking this time to become more at home in yourself. And again, the goal is not to hit some sort of place of perfection, but it's those moments of really having those, I guess you would call it aha moments, where you go, oh, there I am. There I am. So I want to thank you so much for being a part of this process of creating. I'm going to add one more meditation at the end. And obviously you can always come back and you can create in different ways with me, inspired by this painting. And I'm sure you could make a collection of paintings of this with the theme of home. And my desire for you is just to know that this thing called self-identity, regardless of how you may have heard it in a church setting or in any other setting for that matter, it's actually a gift. God really does want you to know yourself. And I'm so happy for you, and I think you should be so proud of yourself that you've accepted the nudge and the invitation to find home within yourself. See you back for one more meditation. Hi, here is the first of 3 meditations that you will find within this class. Meditation number 1 has to do with clouds. And I thought it was appropriate to do this meditation because it is a beautiful symbol for us, which we'll talk about more in a moment, but also because of the painting that we're doing, and that the sky and clouds are part of the process that we're creating within our own creative practice today. So go ahead and find a place to sit quietly, maybe light a candle, and you can pause me if you need to. And however you sit comfortably, either with your eyes open or closed, prayer hands, or just laying them on your heart or even your lap. And let's begin. If there are clouds in the sky and the weather is fairly pleasant, go outside and watch them. Are they moving very fast, or are they relatively stable? Are some of the clouds darker than others? And if it's sunset or sunrise, are there other colors besides white or gray? Are they fluffy or wispy, high or rather low? Are they solid across the sky, or are there gaps between them where the sky shines through? Do you have a favorite kind of cloud? Have you ever seen a rainbow in the midst of clouds? listen to the following passages as you think on the clouds in the sky. Clouds are moisture in the form of water droplets or ice crystals that are suspended in the air, and they are an important part of the water cycle that helps sustain the earth. The first attempts to classify clouds were in the 19th century, and there are over 100 kinds of clouds now recognized, based on such variables as height, shape, and whether they contain water or ice crystals. In the Jewish religious tradition, God was often revealed in a cloud, such as the one that spoke to Moses on the mountain, giving him the 10 Commandments, and the one that led them through the desert, hovering over the tabernacle and the tent of the covenant. Perhaps the Jews, who were very unabstract thinkers, saw a cloud as a way to help imagine God's presence and care in a way that was visible while not tangible. Clouds are helpful to the earth because they actually help protect the planet from absorbing too much of the sun's radiation. But there is more solar energy than one might think on a cloudy day, because much of the radiation that does make it through the Earth's surface is bounced back to the clouds, and they in turn reflected back once again to the Earth. As a result, there is actually more solar radiated heat energy absorbed on a cloudy day than on a sunny one. A gray, cloudy day helps us more than we know. Clouds are amazing to watch, especially on a sunny day, as they head past the sun or hit some high altitude winds and may begin to evaporate in the process. Prophet Isaiah tells us that is just how our faults and sins are before God's all-encompassing love, which is always more powerful than our mistakes. He says, "Remember these things, O Jacob and Israel, for you are my servant. I formed you. You are my servant, O Israel. You will not be forgotten by me. I have swept away your transgressions like a cloud, and your sins like mist. Return to me, for I have redeemed you." Help me to better appreciate your love for me, which calls me to be more fully who I can be, and which always forgives. Help me to forgive myself. Help me to be in your presence. And help me to remember when I see the clouds, to think of your presence, which is with me wherever I go. Let's take a few moments in the silence. And you're ready? When you're ready, come on back to the painting practice.